The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway was a sound of defeat. For the 8th time in 2 months, a caregiver was leaving Blackwood Manor. And this one, a stern woman named Miss Albright, didn't bother to hide her frustration. She threw her suitcase into the back of a waiting taxi, her movements sharp and angry. "It's impossible," she yelled, her voice cutting through the manicured silence of the estate. "The boy is a statue. You're wasting your money, Mr. Vance. He needs a hospital, not a nanny." Julian Vance watched from the towering glass window of his office, his face as impassive as the modern architecture surrounding him. He didn't flinch at her words. He'd heard them all before, in various forms. He's a lost cause. He's gone. There's nothing in there. Each departure felt like another nail sealing the door to his son's world shut. The taxi sped away, leaving nothing but a puff of exhaust and the familiar, suffocating silence that had become the manor's primary resident. Julian's jaw tightened. He wasn't wasting his money. Money was the one thing he had in abundance. What he was wasting was hope, a currency he was dangerously low on. He turned from the window and walked through the sterile, museum-like halls of his own home. Every surface was polished, every line clean, every room a testament to his success as an architect. He had designed this house himself, a marvel of glass and stone meant to bring the outside in. Instead, it had become a beautiful cage, a fortress of grief. He passed the grand piano in the living area, its black lacquer surface coated in a fine layer of dust, a monument to a life before the accident. A life filled with music, with laughter, with the sound of his son's small feet running across the floor. He found Leo in his room, sitting in his wheelchair, staring blankly out the window. "Leo," Julian said, his voice flat. There was no response. Guilt, a cold snake, coiled in his stomach. He had been driving. He backed out of the room and, with a sigh of defeat, called the caregiver agency. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Vance." The agent's voice was strained. "There's no one left on the list, except one. Her name is Clara Mae. Her approach is different. It's built around presence, not pressure." Julian almost laughed. Presence. It sounded like nonsense. But what other choice did he have? "Fine," he said, the word tasting like ash. "Send her." 2 days later, Clara Mae arrived. She was plain in a way that was calming, with warm, observant eyes and an air of quiet strength. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Your duties are simple," Julian stated, his tone all business. "See to my son's needs, attempt to engage him, report any changes to me."
"May I see him now?"
she asked. Julian led her to Leo's room. Clara didn't enter with a fake smile or a barrage of questions. She just stood there for a moment, then gave a small nod to Leo's back. She walked to an armchair, pulled out a book, and began to read. Julian stood in the doorway, baffled. The only sound was the gentle rustle of pages turning. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt shared. He pulled the door closed, a flicker of cynical curiosity stirring within him. The first few days passed in a rhythm of quiet. Clara never forced Leo to do anything. At mealtimes, she'd prepare a plate, cutting a sandwich into playful shapes. "Leo, your lunch is here if you're hungry," she'd say, and then leave him be. Julian watched on the monitor as Leo would eventually wheel himself over and eat. One afternoon, Clara began to play a game of solitaire on the floor. After an hour, Julian saw Leo wheel his chair a few feet closer to watch. It was a minuscule crack in the wall of his apathy, but to Julian, it felt like an earthquake. The next day, Clara played again, this time placing a second deck of cards on the floor nearby, a silent invitation. Leo watched her for a long time. Then, slowly, his right hand lifted and tapped the top card once, and then the impossible happened. A tiny, fleeting twitch pulled at the corner of his mouth. It was the ghost of a smile. Clara, without looking up, smiled herself. "King of Spades," she said softly, "a very strong card." In his office, Julian Vance felt a crack appear in the fortress around his own heart. This fragile progress was soon threatened. Julian's sister Eleanor arrived one afternoon unannounced, a whirlwind of sharp-edged sympathy. "Julian, this has gone on long enough," she declared. "I've spoken to the 8th nanny. She said he's catatonic. He needs a residential facility."
"He's my nephew." "Leo, darling, it's your Auntie Eleanor. You have to fight this. Say something." "Ma'am, you're upsetting him. Please step back. I'm the person responsible for his well-being, and his well-being requires peace. Please." "You're a fool, Julian."
Once she was gone, Clara knelt beside Leo's chair and began to hum a simple, soft tune. Julian watched from the doorway, a storm of emotions raging within him. Clara hadn't just cared for his son, she had defended his soul. That night, a silent alliance was forged between them. The incident seemed to solidify the trust between Leo and Clara. Their biggest breakthrough yet came from an accident. Leo knocked over a jar of dark blue watercolor. Terror flashed across his face, bracing for an anger that didn't come. Instead, Clara got some cloths, sat on the floor, and began to wipe. She held out a second cloth to Leo. He hesitated, then leaned forward and clumsily began to help. Together, wordlessly, they cleaned up the mess. When they finished, Clara said, "There, all better." For the first time, Leo looked back at her with a clear, unmistakable glint of trust. That evening, Julian found Clara in the kitchen. "Clara," he began, his voice raspy, "what you did with my sister. Thank you." Leo was frightened, Mr. Vance, she said. The other nannies tried to pull him out of his world. But his world is a fragile place right now, so I go into his world with him. I show him it's safe. Julian was quiet, absorbing her simple profundity. He had been trying to fix a broken thing, but Clara was tending to a growing one. With this new trust, Clara introduced mobility bars into Leo's room. The first time they tried, fear clouded his eyes. It was one thing to trust her with his silence, another to trust her with his broken body. "I'll be right here," she said gently. "I've got you." Leo's legs trembled violently as he held the bars, sweat beading on his forehead. He wanted to give up, but Clara's presence was an unwavering anchor. "You're so strong, Leo," she murmured. "Just one more second." He held it. For 5 long, agonizing seconds, he stood. As she helped him back into his chair, he looked at her, and in his eyes was the fire of a boy starting to fight back. That night, the image of his son standing was seared into Julian's mind. He was drawn to the dusty grand piano. Driven by an echo of his son's courage, he sat down and wiped the keys. His fingers felt stiff, alien. And then he began to play. It was a simple, hesitant melody, the same one Clara often hummed. It was rusty, but it was music. It was life. From the top of the stairs, Clara listened, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. The healing was no longer just for the boy. The sound of the piano became a nightly ritual, the melodies growing stronger. The breakthroughs began to cascade. The boy who stood for 5 seconds was soon standing for 30. One day, Julian came home to find Leo standing in the living room, gripping small crutches. "Leo has something he wants to show you," Clara said. Leo's face was a mask of concentration. He took a deep breath and pushed off, swinging one leg forward in a clumsy, shuffling motion. He wobbled, but he kept going. Crossing the space one painstaking inch at a time, his eyes locked on his father. Julian stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. He was watching his son climb out of a chasm of despair. When Leo finally reached him, collapsing against his legs, Julian sank to his knees and wrapped him in his arms. "You did it," he whispered. "You did it, Leo." With his body finding its strength, his voice was next. A few weeks later, a brilliant red cardinal landed on a branch outside the window. Leo's eyes widened. He lifted a finger, pointing. He looked at Clara, his mouth opening, and then it came. "Look," he breathed, the word raspy but clear. Clara's heart swelled. "I see it, Leo," she said softly. "It's beautiful." From there, the words flowed like a river. The 3 of them became a family. They ate dinner together, played card games, and filled the house with a sound that had been absent for years. Laughter. The fortress had become a home. One evening, as Clara was tucking Leo into bed, he looked at her seriously. They moved him to the other side of the bed. "The other nannies all left," he said. "Yes, they did," Clara replied. "Why didn't you leave?" "Because I wasn't finished yet," she said. "I could see the boy who was hiding inside all the silence, and I really wanted to meet him." Leo was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that redefined everything.
"You don't have to be born from someone to be their mom. You just have to stay."
In that moment, Clara understood her job was no longer a job. This was her family. And Julian, who had nearly lost everything, had found the person who had rebuilt his world, note by quiet, patient note. The silence was finally truly gone, replaced by the beautiful, messy, wonderful sound of a family rediscovering how to live. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.